accept this deal or face massive maximum pressure. That's the message from President Trump to the Iranian leadership as it relates to the ongoing nuclear negotiations. And it does seem like the Trump administration, for the first time, really, is all on the same page as to our stance. Not the same page as Iran, which could be a problem. But let's get into a couple updates here. We had some statements made by Sebastian Gorka just yesterday, who's the deputy assistant to the president and senior director for counterterrorism, kind of laying out what the current U.S. demands are. Let's give that a listen.
He has been very clear. Iran must dismantle its nuclear weapons capabilities and must assist in the support of all its proxies, all of them, not just Hamas and Hezbollah, all of them, including the Houthis. So with regards to what happens, that's up to the mullahs, to the murderous regime in Tehran that has been suppressing its people, not just the Persians, but all the minorities in that country since 1979. So the shoe is on the foot in Iran, and it's for them to decide whether they will face the full fury of the most consequential president of the modern age, or whether they will say, okay, we give it up.
So not like shocking demands there, not by a long shot. Essentially the complete dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program. They can never have nuclear weapons going forward, and they have to stop supporting proxy networks across the region. We've heard various actors inside of this and all U.S. administrations in recent years say that. The issue recently is we've had different statements made by Steve Witkoff, the presidential advisor to the Middle East, his kind of Middle East envoy, different statements from Senate and House Republicans, different statements from Secretary Rubio, different statements from Secretary Hegseth, different statements from former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. It was hard to figure out exactly what our ask was. This seems much more consistent at this point. And it's a message that kind of continued through some of Trump's speeches in the Middle East this last week. It's also very much in line with a recent note from Senate Republicans who put out a statement saying, quote, "The Trump administration has been clear that the terrorist Iranian regime must completely and verifiably dismantle their nuclear program. Senate Republicans will continue to work with the administration to ensure Iran never obtains nuclear weapons." They even sent a letter, not just Senate Republicans, but all Senate Republicans, 52, all with the exception of Rand Paul, and 177 House Republicans. So for those not in the United States, the Republican Party is the party in power right now. So that's President Trump's party. That's the majority in the House and the Senate. In this letter, they asked President Trump to, quote, "reinforce the explicit warnings that you and officials in your administration have issued that the regime must permanently give up any capacity for enrichment." They went on to say that there can be no deal at all that allows Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon at some point in the future. And this is pretty much in line with what Trump had to say during a couple of his different speeches in the Middle East this last week, specifically talking about ramping up to maximum pressure if they don't agree to a deal soon. Let's give that a listen.
And if I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before.
Now, it does seem like there's a bit of a timetable here. We've heard in the past that there was a 60-day window issued by Trump to get something done here. But of course, nobody actually knows when that 60 days began, so we have no idea when it actually ends. But nonetheless, in another speech these past couple days, Trump said that this offer that's currently on the table and supposedly we handed over to the Iranians in recent days won't last for long. They need to jump on this before it's too late. Here we go.
But they cannot have a nuclear weapon. This is an offer that will not last forever. The time is right now for them to choose. Right now, we don't have a lot of time to wait. Things are happening at a very fast pace. They're happening right here. They're happening at a very fast pace. So they have to make their move right now. One way or the other, make your move.
Now, it's not all sunshine and roses here, unfortunately. There are some reports in the Wall Street Journal earlier today that really what they're trying to put together here is more of a framework of a deal, the concept of a plan, if you will. They say there are growing signs that the two sides are aiming initially to wrap up some sort of framework for a deal rather than a new accord similar to the 2015 nuclear agreement. Iranian officials have talked about agreeing with general principles for a deal. One of the officials briefed on the U.S. proposal said it appears to not be a detailed, comprehensive agreement. And this in fact, was echoed by President Trump in Doha yesterday, where he said it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be pretty simple, just a couple sentences, and we can take it from there. Here you go.
And you probably read today the story about Iran has sort of agreed to the terms. They're not going to make, I call it in a friendly way, nuclear dust. We're not going to be making any nuclear dust in Iran. And we've been strong. I want them to succeed. I want them to end up being a great country, frankly, but they can't have a nuclear weapon. That's the only thing. It's very simple. It's not like I have to give you 30 pages worth of details. There's only one sentence. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
This is kind of a big point of pushback when it comes to these whole negotiations and really anything. We've seen kind of a desire to achieve deals and negotiate deals under the Trump administration. But I think at times maybe we're seeking out saying that we accomplished a deal versus achieving anything in substance. And part of the pushback in this specific case is if we just get Iran to agree to some high-level proposal that we are going to continue talking about this issue, it does nothing. They will continue their path towards a nuclear weapon. We will continue to stand by as they fund groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis across the Middle East. We will continue to pay money to have our resources, the deployments of significant assets in the Middle East designed as kind of a lever of power to force the Iranians into a deal. We're going to continue to have those resources deployed for what? To say that we agreed that we're going to keep talking to get to something. So there is some pushback there, but there's also some concerns about how Iran is viewing this right now. And an Iranian official just in an interview the other day said, hey, we'd be okay with the JCPOA, like the previous Iran nuclear deal. We're good there. Let's go with that, which hints that there might still be quite a bit of space between what the two parties are looking at. This is referring to Ali Shamkhani, a top political military nuclear advisor to the Iranian supreme leader. He said Iran would commit to never making nuclear weapons, getting rid of its stockpiles of highly enriched uranium, which can be weaponized, agree to enrich uranium only to the lower levels needed for civilian use, and allow international inspectors to supervise the process in exchange for the immediate lifting of all economic sanctions on Iran. Now, the enrichment of uranium is still kind of a contentious subject. It sounds like Iran still wants to be able to do that themselves inside their own country. We've seen kind of some waffling in the United States on that, whether that will be allowed and there'll be some sort of monitoring. That's what this guy's proposing here. But it does seem like Trump, Gorka, and others recently are saying that's completely off the table. But Shamkhani here says, quote, it's still possible if the Americans act as they say, for sure, we can have better relations. It can lead to a better position in the near future. However, at the same time, we've got some statements from the Iranian foreign minister saying, quote, enrichment is an issue that Iran will not give up, and there is no room for compromise. However, its dimensions, levels, or amounts might change for a period to allow confidence building. And again, good. I'm in the camp that it's good that we're talking with Iran. I think we should be talking with everybody at all times. I don't think that benefits anyone to shut off communications. We're seeing some hard lines drawn in the sand and not a lot of give on either side right now, which is probably why we're seeing some frustration amongst more of the Iran hawks, people looking for more of the maximalist position, not just here in the United States, but also in Israel. We spoke in yesterday's video how we're starting to see what might be a little bit of a rift between the United States and Israel, or maybe specifically between Trump and Netanyahu. Big picture, we're seeing that there was no coordination with our ceasefire with the Houthis. We just did it, and the Houthis trained all of their weapons since then on Israel. We did not coordinate, or it sounds like Trump talked to Netanyahu. Netanyahu said, do not remove the sanctions from Syria and recognize Shara as the leader of that country, and we did that. Anyways, Trump is not visiting Israel during his trip through the Middle East, and we're apparently starting to put more and more pressure on them to get additional aid into the Gaza Strip. So we are seeing some separation emerge here, and a big part of that are these Iran nuclear talks. In fact, an article just published today in the Jerusalem Post talks to that, where they say Trump must choose Israeli strike in Iran over weak nuclear deal. So there are still pretty loud voices in the United States and Israel talking about how military option is the only option if we're actually going to get this done, probably the toppling of the Iranian regime as we know it today. Now, this specific article, it was an opinion piece, and I should note that, from somebody outside of the government. This one was written by Dr. Raphael Ben-Levi, who they say is a fellow at the Miskov Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy. He's a major in a reservist in the IDF intelligence branch and director of the Churchill Program for Statecraft and Security for the Herat Center's Argamon Institute. He's also the author of a book called Cultures of Counterproliferation, The Making of American and Israeli Policy on the Iranian Nuclear Program. So well-versed in this subject, to say the least. But he says, quote, President Trump's stated Iran policy is the demand that the Islamic Republic completely dismantle its nuclear infrastructure, leaving it with no capacity to enrich uranium, a demand echoed by his top national security advisors and lead negotiator. This is a perfectly reasonable position. However, it is unlikely that such an outcome can be achieved through negotiations alone. He says Iran will never and has never agreed to just completely lay down the only leverage they really have in some of these negotiations, and there's no reason to expect they're going to do it now. He said such a deal that the United States is proposing right now may offer short-term benefits, chief among them a temporary reduction in Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, delaying its breakout time and easing immediate tensions. A deal of this nature would not resolve the fundamental threat posed by the Islamic Republic. On the contrary, it would strengthen Tehran by trading a temporary pause in its weapons development for economic relief and the opportunity to rebuild its regional proxy network with missile capabilities. Within a few years, Iran could resume its nuclear ambitions, this time with a bolstered ballistic arsenal and possibly intercontinental capabilities, posing a direct threat to the United States. Now, a couple key notes there. Yes, maybe sometime in the future, Iran could pose a direct threat to the United States homeland. That's not in the cards right now. And by and large, when we look at the Iranian influence now, it's in the Middle East. So we just need to be clear on that. But I wanted to highlight this article because it brings forward the issue right now that it's not just the U.S. negotiating with Iran, but inside of the United States and certainly inside of Iran and with our allies and partners around the world, there's a lot of different views on the direction this should go. So even if we come to some sort of negotiated settlement with Iran, there's still quite a few people in positions of power suggesting nothing will be accomplished on paper. There has to be military action to actually see this thing through. So nonetheless, it does sound like President Trump is putting a bit of a timeline on this, telling the Iranians they have a short period of time to wrap this up, or else. The or else is probably going to be some sort of added economic sanctions, but with all of the military resources we have in the region, you can't take military action completely off the table. So it's going to be worth keeping an eye on. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.